You're listening to the Gap Podcast with your host, me, Morgan McGill. As we talk God and politics, my prayer is that you're inspired and encouraged to be a part of filling the God-sized gap in the political sphere. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to The Gap. I'm your host, Morgan McGill, and I'm very excited about today's guest. He has inspired me a lot in the political space as being a strong Christian man who does not waver in his beliefs, but also a very strong and effective leader. In being both, it just, you've inspired me a lot, and watching you over the years has been, again, nothing short of inspiring. So Mayor Bill Wells.
Hi.
Thank you for being on the podcast.
I'm excited.
So I'm really excited to jump right into it because I know your path into politics was not, like, it wasn't something that you had planned.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I had no interest in my life of getting into politics. I was always interested in politics. I was the editor of my high school newspaper. And
wow. So you cared. So you knew the issues.
Well, I was always writing these political editorials.
Amazing.
Conservative editorials. And I didn't realize they were conservative. It's just like the things I thought.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, my teachers would be so, excited that I was doing this, and they would all give me the cold shoulder. I was like, why are they being so angry with me? I realized they're like all 60s radicals.
Wow, you had no idea.
They didn't like what I said. That was my first understanding that all people didn't think the way I thought. So.
Oh wow, that's amazing. And then you ended up you are a musician.
Yes.
And so you did music in church. Did you play in church?
Yeah, I did church music for a while. Before that, I did 2 years of college at San Diego State, and then I took off, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I went back east, and I got into a band, and we toured back east.
Amazing.
Mostly military clubs.
That's fun.
And that was a fun kind of life for a while. And then I left that, and I went to Hollywood, and I played music in Hollywood and worked in a recording studio. And
in the Lion's Den.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's hard to keep your soul in Hollywood.
Yeah.
It really is. And then eventually, I got married and went back to school, and, Betty wanted to have furniture and things like that. So, I stopped being a musician because it doesn't pay very well.
And then you were a psychologist.
Well,
or you still are, right? Technically.
Yeah, first I got my RN.
Yeah.
Because I thought it would go well with my music career, and I needed to make money in a hurry.
Okay.
So I went through a fast RN program, and immediately got into psych, and then I really like this, so I went back to school and got my doctorate in psychology.
Wow. And I mean, I think actually psychology goes really well. Psychology and sociology go really well with politics because you need an understanding of people. And so I think that's actually set you up really well, that path.
I feel like everything that's happened in my life has set me up to be exactly where I am right now.
I love that. How did that journey look for you? You went from being a touring musician to an RN to psychology, and now you're mayor of El Cajon. What did that transition look like for you? How did you end up in politics?
Well, it's funny. I think a lot of people's lives are very predictable, and they know what they're going to do, and they go from one step to another.
Mm-hmm.
My life has never been that way. I've always been surprised by where God has taken me.
Same.
In places, and being in politics is no different. I was working for a hospital, and I had gotten pulled out of clinical work into administrative work, and I was doing some work for the hospital as a government relations person. And at the same time, we had a very serious family crisis. Mm-hmm. And I won't go into all that, but it was a pretty bad period of time for us, probably the worst time of my life. And I ended up losing my job at the hospital, and I also had started a business, and that at the same time imploded and fell apart. And we had been making pretty good money, and now we're making zero money. And there were some other more harsh family type things that were happening, and I was pretty devastated, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where we were going to go or what we were going to do. And Betty, who's been always very faithful and really good at being in prayer and into the Word. And she would go into the closet and pray. And I have to go back a little bit. This is where I lose people sometimes, because she can be prophetic. And I know there are people that don't believe in that. And I was probably skeptical of that, when we got married. But I found out real fast that she knew sometimes things that were going to happen before they happen. I mean, in not ambiguous ways, very direct, clear, obvious ways. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. One night she woke me up when we just gotten married, and she said, "You're going to get a job at a church." I said, I'm not. I just got a job at a hospital. I'm starting on Monday. You know that. I mean, no, this is what we wanted. We needed this. She said, "I don't know. You're going to get a job at church." I said, "Well, okay, go back to sleep." So 3 days later, I got a call from a pastor at a church I'd never heard of before. I never heard of the pastor. And he said, "I hear you're a pretty good piano player." I said, "Well, thank you. I appreciate that." He goes, "Would you like to play piano at my church?" And I said, "Oh, no, I don't think so. I just, took this job." He goes, "I only need you on Wednesday night for rehearsal and Sunday morning for service. And I'll pay $600 a month," which back then was my whole rent. That's like, that was a lot of money.
Wow.
And I said, "Wow, okay." And then 3 days later, I was signing on the dotted line, and I had a job at a church. And that happened to us several times throughout our marriage, to the point where then I started asking her, I said, "Well, what's going to happen next?" And she said, "Well, I don't know. It doesn't work that way. I just, when God wants to tell me something, he'll tell me."
I love that.
So we had our low time, and she would go in the closet and pray. And she came out one day and said, "Okay, I know what to do. I've been told." I said, "Fantastic. What is it? Let's go. Let's do it. Let's make this thing work." And she said, "You need to run for office in politics." I said, "What? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life." I said, "No. I mean, I'm probably going to have to declare bankruptcy. We're probably going to have to,
Yeah.
The house might go into foreclosure. I mean, we're definitely not going to be able to live here anymore. I mean, nobody's going to want me right now. I am not on top of my game." And she said, "I don't know, but you're supposed to run for office." And
wow.
I resisted it for about 2 weeks, and she kept after me, because when she wants something to happen, she's very insistent.
Like a good wife.
Yeah, I don't think that's unusual. And
it's not.
Eventually, she kind of browbeat me into making a phone call, and I made a phone call to Pastor Jim Garla, who referred me to somebody else who loved me and wanted me to run for office right away. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. But next thing I know, I'm on the planning commission in Elkhorn. I didn't even know what a planning commission was. And I spent the next 4 years learning how politics worked. And then I ran for city council. I won. And then I was appointed mayor in 2013 because our mayor got in some trouble and had to resign. And then the next year, I ran for mayor and won with 84% of the vote.
It's amazing.
So I've been mayor since.
It's amazing how God, when he wants, like when he says something, when he says move, he will always make a way. And he clearly made a way for you.
But I mean, I think it's important to point out that when the order was given, it seemed incredibly ludicrous to me, and I did not see a way. I mean, imagine if somebody said, "You need to go build a space shuttle." You're like, how?
Yeah.
I don't even know how to begin. And I felt the same way. I was like, how would I run for office? I mean, you go down and sign up somewhere, and so it.
It almost reminds me of Noah's Ark, where like Noah was like, "You want me to build a ship? How big?"
That might be a little more dramatic.
I know, but like it kind of does when it sounds like it's just like a ludicrous thing.
Yeah.
But
Well,
when you know God says it, then you're like, "Okay, God,
same
let's
concept.
go."
Yeah.
Yeah. So once you got into politics, how did that look for you? Because I know a lot of people listening right now have no idea what goes into being in public office, because they see headlines, they see sound bites, they see all the they don't see the day to day, what really goes into being a public servant. And I really want you to speak into that. Like, what did that look like for you once you ended up in public office?
Well, a lot of it's fairly mundane. You go for months and even years sometimes without anything really of any importance happening. You're talking about street lights and sewer systems, and you're talking about maybe refinancing your debt so that you can save some money, and hiring a couple extra police officers, and which is important stuff. It's super important, but it's not terribly exciting, and the TV cameras don't come out for that. But for me, I've only had a short periods of time where it was like that, and I have attracted more controversy and dramatic things happen than almost anybody I know in politics. It seems to follow me around. People laugh at me about it, and they make jokes about it. I started
It's
off
almost like the enemy doesn't want you there.
Well, no, I look at it completely differently.
Really?
I look at it like God has been moving chess pieces for me from the time He told me to go into politics.
Oh, I love that.
And opening doors and parting the Red Sea.
I love that perspective.
In ways that I couldn't have done myself. A lot of people think that I'm like some kind of master manipulator, and I've gotten the media to come around me, and I've gotten all this free publicity, and because I'm so smart. It's not the case at all. It's just that things happened. I mean, the first thing that happened was we had a Ferguson-style event. You remember Ferguson, Missouri? Mm-hmm. Right after that, only a few months after that, we had the same kind of thing happen in El Cajon. It was tragic. An unarmed black man was shot by a police officer, and it was bad. It was bad for everybody. It ended up being an understandable shooting because it was really a suicide by a police officer. The man who got shot kind of orchestrated himself getting shot. But that was happening right at the time when people were not thinking about logic. They were reacting to emotion.
Emotions were very high, yeah.
And within hours, we had people on the streets protesting. We had Black Lives Matter in the town. And it looked bad. And so I was talking to some people that I knew from the NAACP and the Urban League, and there was a video that we had been given by somebody who took a cell phone video of the incident. And they knew about the video. And I told them what happened, and they said, well, could we see the video? And I said, I'm sorry, I can't let you see it. They said, well, you need to release that video. And I said, I think you're right. I think we do. But the problem was we had signed an agreement with the deputy or the district attorney's office. And the agreement was, and all the cities signed it, but if something like this happened, a Ferguson-style event happened, that they would be the arbitrators of how the video was released. And we signed it at the time because it made sense because it took political liability off of us, right? Because we could then say, well, we'd love to do that, but it's up to the DA.
Yeah. But
it turned out to be not good. It turned out that I felt like we could diffuse the situation.
If everyone saw what really happened.
If everybody saw the video, but the DA refused to release it. And this was the first big test for me in leadership because I clearly understood what needed to be done. And I clearly understood what the right thing to do was. But I was also being told by the DA that if I did that, my political career would be over. That she would personally make sure that I never was elected again to any office. And, very strong about that. And I got off the phone. I went to talk to my city manager. He said, what do you want to do? And I said, release the tape. And I thought, well, that's the end of me. I'm done.
But you knew you were doing the right
no,
thing.
I just, I didn't get into politics because it was my lifelong dream. So I figured God got me into this. And if I was into this just for this moment, and then it's over, fine. Then I'll go back to my life because I still have my career.
Yeah.
And the opposite thing happened. People really responded to that. We were the only city, as far as I know, in America to have an incident like this and not have rioting in the streets. We had protests for 3 weeks, but there's no burning of cars, no burning of buildings, no looting, nobody injured. and it was it worked out pretty well.
Wow.
So that was the first big test.
Wow. What other big tests were there?
The second big test was COVID.
Well, yeah, I remember.
You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that one.
There was that time when we all had to take shots and masks because we weren't allowed to go out of our homes. We'd be arrested
that time
if we
that
went
everyone wanted to be in your city.
So, I went along with it for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Because I had run hospitals.
Yeah, most of us went along with it yeah.
When Nathan Fletcher called me, I didn't know very well at the time. He said, "You got to stand with me in this." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He goes, "Well, we're afraid the ICUs are going to be overwhelmed." Now, remember, at that time, they were saying that maybe 3% of the population would die. That's an amazing number of people.
That's huge, yeah.
And I'm thinking, wow. I mean, I work in hospitals. I know our ICUs are already busy. Our ERs are already at capacity. We're going to add hundreds of thousands of sick people trying to get into the hospital and dying in the hallways. So I went along with it for a couple of weeks, but then it didn't happen the way they said it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And, started doing a lot more research, like I think every American did. We got on the internet and, became detectives and sleuths on medical
propaganda
propaganda. And it became clear to me that this was not what they said it was, that the mortality rate was not going to be anywhere near what they said it was going to be. And the people at risk were people that were 70 and older, and people who had comorbidities. And then it just dawned on me that this is going to be terrible. We're going to destroy our economy. We're going to destroy people's lives. People will commit suicide. People will become alcoholics.
We saw that all across.
And on.
Yeah.
We got to do something. And I felt very strongly that I was put in this position to protect people, and that it was my job to protect people. And so after talking to Betty about it and praying about it, we decided that I would tell our police department not to enforce any COVID regulations. Which, again, I remember going to the press conference to do that, and I told Betty, I said, "This is the end. They're going to throw me out. They're going to blame every death on me." And she said, "Yeah, but it's the right thing to do." I said, "Yeah, it is." So we did it. And exactly the opposite. People flocked to me as a result. People would run up to me and hug me and cry and say, "You're the only person who said what I was thinking. I felt like I was crazy until I heard you." And I realized that it really wasn't about so much changing people's lives that much, because it didn't change people's lives that much, but it made people feel like they weren't alone.
Yeah.
And so that was the second big test of leadership.
Friends, in over 15 years in the political sphere, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen amazing men and women forego running for office because they have no idea where to start. And on the other side of that, I can't tell you how many times I have seen amazing candidates fumble the ball so hard because they have no idea what they're doing when they decide to run for office. That is why I founded Revival Consulting. The heart of this company is to help God-fearing men and women get elected to local, state, and federal office, because we see a country where the men and women in positions of political power and influence know and love God. If that's you, if you're considering running for office but you have no idea where to start, or you need help, go to itsrevival.com and fill out our consultation form, because we want to help you. We need your voice now more than ever. If you have seen anything that's going on in the world today, you know that you were put on this planet for such a time as this, and we need you. So please don't hesitate. Go to itsrevival.com and fill out our consultation form today. And the third? I feel like there was one more reason.
The third is really the battle that I continue to be in with what I call the homeless industrial complex. Yep. I know a lot about homelessness because I've spent my life working with mentally ill people, and a lot of them are homeless.
It's almost like God has set you up for this.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah.
So when I got to be married, homelessness went from being a minor distraction to 90% of what we thought about all the time, because California basically made crime legal and homelessness acceptable.
Yep.
And they basically went on a media campaign to the entire nation, said, you want to do drugs and not be arrested and not be bothered and sleep on our streets and do whatever you want, come to California.
Yeah.
And
it's actually really scary going downtown today.
It is. And, California has a much, much larger homeless population than anybody else. We have about 180,000 homeless people in California, according to the U.S. government. Well, I think it's probably a lot more. Mm-hmm. But that same website that the U.S. government puts out about homelessness will tell you that Texas has about 25,000. New York has about 25,000. Those are the next two biggest states. So look, we have 180, and the next biggest state has 25,000. And you have to ask yourself why. And the reason is that the California State Legislature has done everything it possibly can to encourage homelessness in California. So you ask yourself, okay, well, what's the reason for this? And people immediately say, well, it's just liberal, crazy liberal ideology. But I've come to the conclusion it's about something much more nefarious than that, and it's about money.
Yeah.
We spent $25 billion in the past 5 years on homelessness in California. Every single one of those dollars had to be spent on a Housing First program. Mm. Housing First is the idea that you can't treat drug addiction. You can't ask people to do anything. You just give them a house and they'll be fine, because it's not drug and alcohol abuse that's the problem. It's the economy. Mm-hmm. But I know if you ask any cop or fireman or doctor or nurse, they'll tell you the same thing. Everybody on the streets is addicted to drugs and alcohol. Now, there's always anecdotal stories. Somebody, my aunt lost her job and she was homeless for a while. But the truth is, we have beds for people.
Yeah.
The people you see on the streets, they're not on the streets because they can't get a bed. We have beds.
Yeah.
They on the streets because they refuse to leave the streets because they want to do their drugs and their alcohol.
And they can't in the shelters, right?
Right. So the Housing First model takes this $25 billion and politicians in California give them out to NGOs, non-governmental organizations, small little organizations that pop up everywhere to provide all these services. Now, who do you think runs those NGOs? They're Democrat sympathizers of the people that are giving out the money. Mm. It's a very incestuous situation where all this money is being given out to people that they know, who then give them money back for their campaigns, and it just goes round and round and round.
Yep.
And I thought this was the case for a long time, and then recently there's a guy who is the number 2 guy on the San Diego Housing Commission, a commission that has almost $1 billion that they spend every year on homelessness. He sent a very angry letter to my consultant saying, you tell Wells I'm gunning for him, that I'm going to destroy him if he doesn't leave basically the Housing First model alone.
Wow, you poked the bear.
Yeah. So I made a video about it, I said, whatever. And I got 400,000 views on that, and he got excoriated. But it really drove the point home that they're just like, I think, the vaccines. We realized the vaccines a lot were about money. The homeless situation is a lot about money, and they don't want to solve it.
Yeah.
And that's not acceptable to me.
I agree with you. And I think in all of those tests that you just walked us through, the main constant was you did not fear man. You did not let the fear of man dictate what you knew in your spirit was the right thing to do, because the Lord was with you, and you're like, God put me on assignment. I'm supposed to be here. And I can't say that for very many people.
I don't want to mislead you. I had plenty of fear.
Well, I mean, yes, but you didn't let it dictate your decisions.
Well, I finally just did what I had to do. But
yeah. But I feel like we see too many politicians and too many people, just even in general, they let what the world is saying and the loud voices, because the world is loud, overpower the quiet voice of the Lord, leading them. And I think just in watching your career, and watching all the decisions you've made, it's been very inspiring to see someone who's like, no, I know what's right, and I'm going to stand up for it, and I don't care what anyone says about me or what anyone says. And you didn't like, you might have internally feared, because I mean, we're all human and we get fear comes in, but you didn't let it take you out. And I think that more people needed to know that there are people like you out there that are like, I know what God's telling me to do. It's amazing. Just I just love you.
Wow.
But so what are some things that you would like to say to people listening who may want to run for office but have no idea either where to start or still questioning if that's even, like, they think they want to run but they don't know?
Well, I would give the same advice for running for office to any young person who wants to do anything that's interesting. And I know you're going to resonate with this, because I know, wait till I say what I'm going to say, but I think you feel the same way I feel. And that is, don't let fear dictate what decisions you make. All people have big ideas. How many times have you been, out with your friends and somebody says, I've got a great idea for a product, and you talk about it and they say, well, that really is a good idea. You should do that. Yeah, you should absolutely do that. And then they say, yeah, I should, I might. And then, you see them 3 months later and you say, did you ever do that thing? You say, it was hard. Yeah, I had to get capital and get a manufacturing. I don't know how to do any of that. Whatever. And that's pretty much how all people do things. So there are people that will think about running for office and they'll say, I have something to say. I could do it better. I would like to get involved. I would like to be pushing this agenda. And then they think about it and they say, yeah, I'm probably not smart enough. I'm probably not good looking enough. I would never be able to get through. I don't have any money and all, and I think that's the devil whispering in your ear saying, oh no, you don't do that. Mm-hmm. So you have to overcome your fear and just do big things, do outlandish things.
I love that.
And the second thing is then it's not really that complicated. Go and speak to people that are doing it. I do think people sometimes have a tendency to kind of jump the shark sometimes and go a little bit too fast, too far. I'm glad that I was on the Planning Commission before I was on the City Council, before I was a mayor, and now I'm running for Congress, and it seems like a natural progression to me. Mm-hmm. And so when I talk to people, I'll say, you should consider running for school board, because that's super important right now.
It is very important right now.
I mean, it's more important, really. Look, I don't want to. I'm not going to pick on anything, but say that you're a assembly person, you're a Republican assembly person in
California,
and you happen to get elected and go to the assembly. Your school board person will make bigger decisions and have a bigger impact on the lives of people in California than your assembly person will, because they can't get anything done.
So true.
And but there aren't headlines about school board members, and there aren't exposés, and you don't get the big thundering applause at dinners and things like that. So it's better to be a congressperson or be a governor or something like that. But I think that it's okay to start small and see where it goes.
I love that, because you're right. A lot of people they're like, I'm going to run for office, and they go like straight for Congress. I did that. Right. They go straight for Congress, or they go straight for governor, go straight for Senate, and they don't like. I mean, any job that you have, you're not going to go straight to CEO. You start in the company and you work your way up, unless you start your own company. But then, that's also, takes a while. So I love that you encourage people to start small, because I think that more people need to know that that's actually important.
I mean, it just depends on who you are. I mean, there's a woman I just met with who's going to run for Congress up north a little bit, and I think she has a good chance to win. But her husband's a billionaire, and
See?
she's a news anchor, and she's Hispanic, and I mean, bam,
She
bam,
has
bam.
all the name ID, the money.
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
perfect.
That kind of puts you in a different category.
Yes.
I would not have been able to run for Congress in the beginning because nobody knew who I was.
Yeah.
It took years and years and years of being on KUSI 8,000 times and Fox News and
Yeah.
you know, to get people to understand who I am and be on my side.
Yeah, there's always outliers. So another thing that I wanted to ask you, especially before we go, is what would you say to people who, Christians who aren't active in the political space
Well,
at all? Like,
yeah. Let me
don't even vote.
let me tell you a little story, and you probably want to hear this story anyway, because I imagine you want to ask why I'm running for Congress.
Yeah.
And the answer is, I think most people when they decide to run for Congress, especially if they're going from being a mayor of a city or something like that, they think, well, this is the natural progression of my career. This would be good for my career. This would be good financially. It opens up these opportunities for me. Maybe it'll help me when I get out. I could go, be an anchor on Fox News, or I could be a chancellor of a college. And you think about all the positive things for yourself.
Yeah.
Because people are pretty much focused on themselves. I mean, I'm the same. I mean, I care about what happens to me and my family, and so this race is different for me than that. I'm sorry. What was the original question you asked me again?
What would you say to Christians who
who aren't involved? Okay, so
yeah.
So when I thought about running for Congress in this time, somebody mentioned it to me, and my original reaction was, no, that's dumb. It's a suicide pact. I'm not going to win that seat. It's too hard. I really don't want to go to D.C. I don't want to fly back and forth. I'm kind of happy doing what I'm doing. I was just about to kind of go into semi-retirement and start traveling and do all these things. But during COVID, I got really involved in studying about totalitarianism. And I came to the conclusion, reluctantly, that America is on the verge of some kind of totalitarianism, maybe not the totalitarianism of Joseph Stalin, but maybe the totalitarianism like Canada and Australia and the UK, a soft totalitarianism.
Wow.
Where, your rights could be erased. And I saw that freedom movement was being erased during the COVID times, that right now they're working real hard to erase our freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. They're working real hard to erase our Second Amendment rights. And I think the Constitution is no longer cared for. It's considered something that's in the way of what a lot of people want to do. And all that frightened me to the point where I realized that we're maybe an election cycle or two away from this kind of totalitarianism. And when I put it in that frame of context, and then I realized that I'm the only person around in this area that probably can beat Sarah Jacobs, the person I'm running against, who's a hardcore left-wing radical, then I realized it was my obligation. I had an obligation to do this because God had given me so much favor and brought me all the way to the big game, right? You work with a kid from from Pop Warner up to the Super Bowl, and then he gets to the Super Bowl and says, yeah, I don't think I want to be in that game. It's like, no, everything you did was to get here, to do this thing. So now I'm up at the Super Bowl. It's my obligation. And I say the same thing when I'm talking to people. I said, you have an obligation in this too. I don't know what it is. You need to pray about it and ask God what my obligation is. But you have something. I know your obligation is not to do nothing. So maybe it's just to talk to your crazy uncle who comes for Thanksgiving and he's a super lib, and you try to
reason
with him a little bit. Maybe it's to have a little dinner party with people on your block and say we all need to try to get behind this candidate or that candidate or help in some way. Maybe it's to give money. Maybe it's to run for office. I don't know what it is. And certainly not everybody can run for office. No. Not everybody's made to do that. And believe me, if you're not called to do it, I wouldn't do it because it's a lot of work and not a lot of payoff.
Yeah.
But I've always felt called to do it, and I've enjoyed it.
I love that. And it's true. We all have an obligation, especially as Christians, as believers. We have a Christian nation, whether people want to believe it or not. The founding principles of this country are biblical. We are a Christian nation, and if we don't protect and defend the Constitution, if we don't protect and defend this nation, if we don't stand up and fill in that gap, then we are just leaving room for our country to be extinct.
Well, that's what we've done for the last 100 years. We basically abdicated government to the people that are not believers. And we've taken on the idea that we're kind of above that. We're not going to roll around in the mud with the political people. We're spiritual people. And look what happened. Look what happened to it. And, frankly, if you look what happens to the world, that wasn't in a vacuum either. I mean, what happens in America spreads to the world like a virus.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for
my
being
pleasure. It was
on
fun.
with me today. For those of you listening, I have the pleasure of interviewing Mrs. Betty Wells, Bill's
Dr.
other
Betty Wells.
Dr. Betty Wells, next week. And please don't miss it, because he couldn't do this without her.
Absolutely.
And hearing her testimony and everything that she's walked through with him, it's gonna be so good. So don't miss it. But thank you again for being on.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. I cannot wait to see what God continues.
Can I give my website in case people want to reach out to me?
Absolutely.
It's wellsforcongress2024.com. And if you send me an email, you want to talk about anything, I'd be happy to call you back.
Awesome. You're so great. Thank you again for being on with me today. It's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to see what God does through you next, because
thank you very much.
I know
Great
it's gonna be
podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to share it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss an episode. Now go out in the world and make disciples. We'll catch you in the next one.